Today I am filling in, because no one can replace the great Jim Brett, who is the master of all things generous and kind and gracious. He couldn't be here this morning, so I got the short straw. But so it's going to be my pleasure to introduce our speaker. There's a lot of ways I could do this, but I'm going to be very straightforward with you. Annie McLean Custer has been my colleague and friend for a long, long time. I'm very fond of who she is and where she comes from. Her dad was my law partner at Orr and Reno. When her mother was in the legislature, I was her fiscal agent. When we started Rath and Young, all those years ago, the first person we hired was Annie. And what she gave to the firm, not just in terms of effort, but in terms of character and heart and a smile, really has been helped shape us to where we are today. Her practice, particularly in the area of adoptions, is remarkable. And there are people in this state today who are very strong contributors to their communities and their families, because they were able to be placed with loving and caring parents. And she won't talk about it, but you will never know how many of those people are where they are, because Annie made it happen. So that's the kind of person, in my judgment, politics apart, that belongs in government. And we are grateful for the voice she gives and the character that she brings. She's in her fifth term, which I find really hard to believe, especially since she still has some timesheets that she hasn't turned in. And maybe we can finish that this morning. Look, she brings to the congressional seat the same level of energy and commitment that she's done with everything in her life, from skiing to being a mom, you name it. She brings it. And she is one that, in a world that is incredibly partisan, you can sit down with Annie and get a straight answer and talk regardless of what side of the ballot you're on or how you vote. And I think that's the way it ought to be. And I think we are very fortunate to have her there. And I'm going to introduce to you all now our Congresswoman and my friend, Annie McLean Custer. Custer!
Note to self, ask Tom to do my eulogy. Thank you, Tom. That was beautiful. That was really very kind, and I'm very, very grateful, and a lot of fun memories. Just quick Tom Rath story. Well, two. One is that Tom and Christine and their kids were the only people that my father insisted come to the wedding with your kids. And the other is that when Tom and I met for the first time, he didn't make it easy. We talked for an hour about all the different law firms in the state, and at the very end, he said, "I'm thinking of starting a firm, would you come?" And I said, "Yes, but there's two things you need to know about me," because we have been very close as family friends for so long. I said, "I'm a Democrat, and I'm going to have a baby, but Brad doesn't know yet, so I think it's important for you to know." And Tom couldn't have been a better boss for both of those reasons. We put together, in the end, powerhouse government relations group, and he was thrilled that we had both sides of the aisle. And your comments are certainly accurate, that the bipartisanship is in my heart and still with me. So I want to thank Tom Bishop is in the room, and BAE. Thank you very much for our breakfast. And, of course, Larry, and give my best to Jim. Where did I lose Larry? Oh, yeah. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. And my best to Jim. It's so much fun to be with you this morning. I haven't seen your faces. Haven't seen anybody's faces. 2 years of this is quite amazing, but I'm so grateful. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing in the last 2 years. And it starts, many of you have been very kind to mention this morning, probably the last picture you saw of me, but Literally 18 months ago, I was running for my life in the U.S. Capitol, just 30 seconds, it turns out, before this thundering mob of insurrectionists made it to the third floor. And you're going to see some of this video in July that we now have security footage. But literally, you saw me in the gas mask, carrying my purse. I never let go of my purse as we were being evacuated. And now we have the footage in the hallway of me getting onto the elevator. And literally 30 seconds later, the insurrectionists are in that hallway. And my colleagues that were behind me in the gallery, there was that long line of people, they couldn't leave. They had to lock the doors. And it took, I think someone said 8.5 minutes before the police, there were no police on the third floor at that point, before they could get up there and subdue the mob. And when my colleagues did finally come out, you may have seen this photo, it has been out, but the insurrectionists are prone on the floor, guns to their head by the Capitol Police, and my colleagues just getting out. And so, it's... so many things are going on right now, but I hope that you will tune in to the January 6th committee. I think they're doing an extraordinary job. I'm so proud of all of my colleagues. Liz Cheney has just been extraordinary, so courageous. She was that night. She helped to save the democracy that night and make the decision to go back to the Capitol. We went back at 8 and stayed till 3:30 in the morning and took the vote so that you all could wake up in the morning to a stable democracy and the election of the President of the United States. But I really appreciate what they are doing. It's not easy. They all now have round-the-clock security. She's had round-the-clock security for the past couple of years. And they're putting their country ahead of any kind of political gain. So, but that's only one of many things that's going on in our lives. So since that fateful day, my team, and let me make sure you meet Nick Brown, my district director, and Amy Slattery, who's with us, my deputy district director, and my whole team in D.C., have been working hard every single day as these crises have been piling up. So starting with worldwide highly contagious pandemic, I served on the health subcommittee. We had meetings. We were all on Zoom, just the way you were all on Zoom, after that fateful Friday the 13th. I'll never forget it was Friday the 13th. And we were meeting with Dr. Fauci and with all the experts every week or 2 weeks, and just trying to get the funding there for the research to get the vaccine, for the PPE. I see Matt Hood, and I know many of you work with hospitals and healthcare providers, and the frantic phone calls that we were having on, can we get the masks together, can we get the suits together? And then we got the vaccine, and then how to get the vaccine out. I mean, it's a miracle. It's a total miracle that we pulled that off. It's not perfect. I had a breakthrough case myself last month, but it kept me out of the hospital, and I have asthma. I was very concerned for 2 years as I'm flying back and forth, and we took 16 trips before the vaccine, back and forth to vote on the American Rescue Plan and all of that. And then more recently, this unrelenting war in the Ukraine by Russia and really against all of Western democracy. This is we call it with the police, the thin blue line, but the NATO line feels even thinner. And thank you to Tom for my pin this morning. And everything that we're doing now, the funding, the making sure that using the diplomacy, thank God President Biden had restored our role in NATO and restored our relationships around the world. And then the issues that you deal with every day, supply chain, price gouging, inflation, and obviously the shortages and what we hear about every single day, the higher prices on gas and food and medicine and housing. And then the gun violence, terrorizing children in schools or people in grocery stores, and really leaving this intense, as a result of all these threats, this intense rate of anxiety, depression, high increase in suicides, high increase in drug overdose deaths. And I'm sure you're feeling it with your employees, that it's a very, very anxious time. I think particularly for families. I was mentioning I have 8 nieces, and they all working families with young kids at home. My own boys, we've had 1 wedding finally under our belt, but we don't have the grandchildren yet. But just what a struggle this has been on marriages, on trying to keep working. But I marvel at the resiliency. I remember calling Joe Murray's colleague, Andy Vermillion, down at Fidelity down in D.C. on that Monday morning in March of 2020. And I said, Andy, oh my God, they've got 5,000 jobs in my district. Like, what can I do? What's going to happen? And he goes, no, we're good. I said, what? He said, no, we're good. He said 98% of Fidelity's employees across this country were at work Monday morning. I said, what? And he said, yeah, at home. And it just blew my mind. I know about your resiliency planning, but that totally blew my mind. And then when I talked to Tom's counterpart down in from BAE, he said, no, we're good. He goes, the 50% that can work at home are at home, and the others are coming in, and we're putting up plastic, and we're doing this and doing that. And at that point, we didn't even know about the masks. We were just washing every surface, But the resiliency of the American people and of corporate America has really blown my mind, and all the nonprofits in the rooms as well. The meetings that we were having with the college presidents that spring, most of the students went home that spring, but in August we started meeting about what the fall was going to look like and what the testing was going to be and what the regimes were going to be. And so there's a part of this that is really an extraordinary inflection point for our country, because there's a lot of friction and noise and in the press, but most people have put their shoulder to the wheel and kept this moving forward. And you don't realize this, but we have been doing that in Congress as well. And we have been getting the funds out there and getting the programs up and running and getting you the support that you need. And I just want to give one example of bipartisanship, because Tom led with that. It's in my DNA. I was raised in a Republican family, so you all know that part. I always tell my colleagues when they hear that, some of them are surprised. I say, well, you haven't met my mother. But in the spirit of bipartisanship, when I went to Congress, I started a bipartisan task force on, at that point it was about heroin and then opioids, and then now we've morphed it into mental health and addiction. And as a result of that work that we've been doing, I started it with Frank Ginta, and now I work with Republicans and Democrats, both sides of the aisle. I like to say it's a good issue because there's not a lobby on the other side. There's no heroin lobby pushing back at us. But still, it's been hard to bring people together. And I'll be very honest with you, since January 6th, that was really challenging to reach across the aisle. They tried to kill us, not all of them. But and so just last week, we passed a bill that is called the Mental Health and Wellbeing Act. And the thing that I'm most proud of is it passed 402 to 20. And you might ask yourself, who are the 20 that are opposed to better mental health and well-being? But I'm just going to give you a little sense of what this package. So our task force put together an agenda, actually, of 73 bills. So there's more work to be done. And to be on our agenda, you had to be it had to be a bipartisan bill. And then what we do is we encourage members to join these bills. And we educate members. We have hearings and roundtables on addiction and recovery and treatment and law enforcement and all the rest. So this package will increase access to life-saving treatment. Primarily, what I've been involved with is what's called medically assisted treatment, MAT, for addiction, which is incredibly effective. But also therapy, just getting therapy out to people, rural communities, substance use treatment generally, recovery housing, suicide prevention, all of these things that we're trying to deal with in young people, but also for all generations. Investing in the behavioral health workforce, so I know my colleagues here in the healthcare field understand that we lack the people power to get access. And one sort of counterintuitive but sliver of silver lining to this opioid crisis here in the state and across the country is that people who get into recovery, as we knew from alcohol, can live perfectly functional lives, and many of them have gotten very interested in the field and have gotten into therapy themselves as providers, and it's augmenting the workforce. Strengthening pediatric mental health care, Medicaid behavioral health services, and suicide prevention on college campuses, which has been an issue. So I just wanted to lead with that we can tackle tough issues and we can come together to do it. But back to the hard truth, in March of 2020, we faced a total economic collapse in the face of a highly contagious global pandemic. And we stepped up, as I said, we invested in vaccine and treatment and PPE. And now here we are 2 years later, and our community and our economy have survived. Obviously, we've had bumps in the road, but through the American Rescue Plan, we saved hospitals, small businesses, schools, colleges, theaters, restaurants, and the list goes on. Think of all the institutions in this state that might have failed. And we passed the Paycheck Protection Program, which all of you likely were involved in some way. Critical resources to save more than 40,000 businesses across the state of New Hampshire. That's more than $3.7 billion to keep jobs going and the economy going. I want to give a shout out to the people who work on Capitol Hill, because we had never heard of this program, and they came up with that in 10 days. We were back on the plane, back to DC to pass that. But the concept that we needed to keep the paychecks flowing, that rather than everybody lose their job, and then we'll try to piece it back together with food programs and housing programs. And we had to do some of that because the unemployment did go up to 16%. But for the most part, people continued to get a paycheck. And funding for our communities, $112 million for the local fiscal recovery funds. I remember talking to cities and towns that couldn't get PPE for their fire and rescue and, the expenses that they had. So the unemployment went up to 16%. Now it's back down to 2.1%. In some ways, we're the envy of the country. When I tell my colleagues that, they can't believe it. But it's created its own set of challenges. And I've talked to many of you, every single business I visit. And again, nonprofit, this is an issue. So we're taking this on head on. We need to fund and promote career and technical training opportunities. This is something I've always believed in, but now more than ever before. Our community colleges, our high school programs are amazing. I love visiting the high school programs where you can come out with an LNA, you're 18 years old, you can go to work, and then save some money to get an apartment, to go to the community college, to then finish your 4-year degree, and it goes on and on. And when you're in the healthcare environment and you talk to people in administration, they'll tell you this story that started that way, and it's amazing. We're working on expanding access to J-1 and H-2B visas, and I know I've talked to a number of you about this, certainly in the hospitality, in the skiing world, which is my world. I'm the chair of the, again, bipartisan ski and snowboard caucus in Congress. And this is a big priority for us, for our seasonal employers and small businesses. And then, again, back to the opioid epidemic, because it sort of is in a part of all of our lives. We've seen really innovative ways that businesses in New Hampshire have recognized that we lost people from the workforce. Healthy working age people are no longer able to come 5 days a week and get there on time, and for some small businesses not steal the money. Let me give a shout out to Hypertherm. I don't think they're here, but they're just such an extraordinary corporate citizen responsible. They have brought on 2 full-time social workers on their payroll who work embedded at Hypertherm for their workforce to help people, not just people that are in treatment and recovery for alcohol or substance misuse, but for family members. I have been going through this. My brother out on the West Coast ran into a problem with opioids after some surgeries a few years ago. And the challenge for families when you're trying to be helpful, when you have to take time off from work, when I have to time my visits and then fly out there and, oh my God, flew out to Seattle, rented a car, drove 4.5 hours up into the mountains, got there. I was going to take him to another surgery. And at 7:30 Monday morning, we got the call the surgery was canceled for COVID. I'm like, you're killing me. And then I went back a month later and we got it done. And we got him back on treatment and back on this medication-assisted treatment. But just living it takes a toll on your workforce. So there is some glimmer of good news at hopefully the end of this. I know it's not going to end, but I have been checking the numbers every single day for over 2 years, how many people in the hospital with COVID. And then I thought to myself recently, I don't know how many people are in the hospital with pneumonia, and I don't know how many people are in the hospital with heart attacks or car accidents or anything else. So I think at this point, we are going to learn to live with it. We get your boosters, prepare yourself, keep yourself safe. Children, finally, we've got children's vaccines, which are huge. But in the meantime, things, I think, are going to look up. People are down and out right now. Summer is coming at the best time for them. But workers have jobs, and wages have gone up, and home equity has risen. And except for a few bumps in the road recently, retirement savings have grown. And I'm no Pollyanna. I want to be clear about that. I spend my day every day helping people that are struggling with the high cost of gas and food and rent. But we can see an end to that. That's cyclical. Here's the cold, hard truth, by the way, on gas prices. The last time oil was at the current price that it's at, the average price of gas at the pump was $4.25 per gallon. Today, gas prices are right around 75 cents higher. And the difference across just the past 3 months is the result of historically high profit margins for refining oil into gasoline. And I was shocked at the numbers when we delved into this, but oil and gas companies are announcing record profits while Putin's war in Ukraine is driving up prices. And some of these companies, big companies that we all know well, are prioritizing stock buybacks while families are really struggling with the higher prices at the pump. And it's why the House passed last month, the Consumer Fuel Price Gouging Prevention Act. And I think we can do more and we need to do more. It's why the president went into the petroleum reserve. But it's not just the gas prices. There are folks in this room that know it's energy prices as well. Our focus has been, our reliance has been on foreign fossil fuels, and that's made us very vulnerable to these price shocks. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we are working to bolster domestic production with clean energy production, independent energy. And the House passed a package of clean energy investments that would spur production in offshore wind. My friend John Green isn't with us, I don't think, from Eversource. He was planning to be here, but they're getting very involved. All of New England is getting very involved in this offshore wind, and it's going to make us less reliant on these foreign and faraway sources. Solar is picking up in a big way. Dan Weeks and I visited many companies now, climbed up on the roof and, seen the solar arrays are becoming much more viable not just for residential, but we just did one up in Franklin, And by the way, come to us if your towns or communities or businesses are looking for funding, because there's sources of funding on this. Franklin has just, we had a ribbon cutting program called USDA, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, on a big array in a field. Excuse me, and hydro, and I won't get into this, it's a long story, but I'm very, very proud of it, and it was really fun working on it. I led the bill in the House on hydro, and it has tremendous potential, and we like to call it a damn good idea. So, and also we're focusing on lowering the home energy bills. Energy efficiency, home weatherization, and heating assistance are big programs here in New Hampshire, and we fight hard to keep them going. And I'm glad that the governor is finally using these American Rescue Plan funds to provide relief to New Hampshire families on high costs. I'll pick up the pace here on the Agriculture Committee that I serve on. We're lowering food costs. You learn a lot. It's like getting, 4 years of college, and now I'm in my 10th year, but there's a monopoly in meat packing. There are only 4 major meat packers in the entire country, and it's monopoly pricing, and it hurts everyone. And so we're trying to incentivize and encourage and support growing food closer to home. And we can do that, and luckily in New Hampshire and in New England, and try to bring our costs down and bring healthier food closer and not have to pay the trucks all the way from California. On the Health Subcommittee, again, looking to lower costs and increase access. That's just my mantra all day, every day. And just a few weeks ago, we passed my prescription drug bill that I'm excited about to cut red tape for companies bringing generic drugs to market, and it'll give patients more options, and it will lower prices through competition. So, with all these challenges, it's a tremendous honor to serve all of you. And I want to end on a positive note. I'm the vice chair of a group that we call the New Democratic Coalition in Congress. Anybody that spends time down in Washington, you're familiar with New Dems. I'm running actually for chair next cycle. And we believe in good jobs and opportunity. We believe in the people in this room that through good jobs and through better opportunity, we will have a better shot at a positive, optimistic, successful future for everyone. And I've had such good relationships with so many of you in this room, former clients, lots of friends, and it's an honor to serve you. And as we address the challenges ahead, and I might add, I did not rewrite the speech on Friday, just so you know. I might have. We might have been talking about something else. I figured we'd get to it in the questions and answers, but we've got bigger challenges coming toward us. The impact of the Supreme Court on our personal and private healthcare decisions. I've talked about the impact of climate change. And then the biggest one of all, the resiliency of our democracy and how to restore our democracy, restore the congeniality that Tom and I have had for these many years. I stand before you acknowledging that the COVID pandemic has taken a toll on all of us, on our families, on our communities, on our employees. But I believe in the people of New Hampshire. I think we're resilient, I think we're innovative, and I think we're going to come back stronger than ever before. So thank you. And as always, happy to take questions. Matt Hood for the win here.
Thank you, Congresswoman Kessler. It's lovely to see you and appreciate all that you're doing. I also wanted to say, so Department of Health, thank you for your engagement at the very outset of COVID. And you talked about PPE and you talked about all of the struggles when procedures were suspended and making sure that there was capacity for people. So thank you for your work in that space. And the question I have, among the panoply of topics that you raised, is just one that you said at the very end, your work on prescription drug costs. Because as amazing as a COVID vaccine is in the short period of time that was developed, cost of pharmaceuticals are challenging in terms of accessibility and healthcare spend. So I was just, if you could elaborate on what you're doing, that would be really helpful.
So it's very interesting. I have a sort of a unique perspective among my colleagues because we did a lot of work when I was at Rath & Young with prescription drug companies. I used to tell them, you're not selling cigarettes, it's medicine. Like, they have an image problem in a big way. And I've done a lot of work with healthcare providers, and certainly my job first and foremost is a consumer advocate for the people that I serve. So the costs are too high for some people. They can't get the medicine that they need. And for employers, I'm very aware of how that translates to you. When I first started with Tom, or when I first got to the table, if you will, of partners in the firm, we would sit around and talk about healthcare, and we could give a secretary and her entire family healthcare. That was just the norm. And by the time I left, it was, we can give you health care, and then you can pay for your spouse's health care, and then if you have kids, oh my gosh, and that was in a law firm. I can only imagine in a business that's closer to the margin. So it's a huge priority for us, and we had, the House has passed even more steps. And the biggest one of all, to me, the biggest kind of donut hole, if you will, or hole in the fabric, is the federal government negotiating lower prices for Medicare beneficiaries. That just slipped through the cracks. Not when I was in Congress, a while ago. When Medicare Part D was created, they have a prohibition on negotiating a volume discount. And the way that business works is all about the volume discount. The VA, the federal government, the federal employees, all of the plans that you're in, that's what the pharmacy benefit managers are all about, getting the best price. And the big Walgreens and CVS, and they can have lower prices because of this volume discount. And we've got to do that for the Medicare population. And frankly, I think we should do it across the board. I think, so those are the types of fixes that we've been looking at. And as I say, it was part of the package of bills that we will no longer call Build Back Better. But just so you know, we're trying to build a better America. So that package is in the Senate. It includes the climate bills, the prescription drug, and the child care, restoring the child care, which, by the way, is another big issue that we have this very low unemployment challenge, is that people can't get back to work. But and I am an optimist. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, and I am still optimistic that the Senate will come up with some version, maybe not of all of those things, but I have heard that prescription drugs will be in the package. Yeah. Say a prayer. Yes, Tom.
Congresswoman, you made reference to the Supreme Court last week, not only overturning Roe versus Wade, but also the gun decision.
It's incredible.
Could you just address both of those and where you see both issues going?
Thank you. Whiplash. If you're trying to keep up with it, two podcasts that I highly recommend. One of them is called Amicus, and Dahlia Lithwick went through both decisions this weekend, and Brad and I were enthralled because I know I need to read the Dobbs opinion, but it's very hard. The tone is so harsh. I'm not shocked by the outcome. I'm shocked by the tone. I do not know the vehemence against my people, female people. It's hard. But the whiplash of those two decisions, and by the way, I should tell you, I feel like, I'm trying to bring you some good news and then deal with this. There was incredibly good news out of Congress, and I swear they stomped on it on purpose because they announced partway through the week that they were going to have Friday announcements. It was on the docket for Monday, and I swear they stomped on it on purpose because the House had passed and the Senate passed the biggest package in 30 years of gun safety measures to protect children, babies in schools, and families in grocery stores. And so I'll start with that one. I had a hard time getting my brain around it, and I'm going to have to sit down and read it because I thought these Federalists, the Federalist Society, this whole effort was to get to a place where states would decide these things. But this was a 105-year statute in New York State, similar to what we had here. I don't know, that would require a permit for concealed carry. We have open carry. You can carry, and then people know, oh, that person has a gun. But concealed carry is a different kind of thing. And lots of states have these permits. And there's a threshold for, are you a dangerous person that we'd rather not have you carry? And if you talk to police, they don't like this situation. It's unnerving to them to go into a situation where they don't know who has guns. And by the way, this hasn't been discussed very much about January 6th, but it's critical to your understanding. D.C. has extremely strict gun laws. And most of these people, not the tourists, and there were tourists on my plane coming home the next day who said, I didn't see any violence. I think that's fake news. And I'm like, oh no, trust me. But that there were arrests in the days leading up of people that had truckloads of weapons. And the word went out, they had their weapons in the hotels out in Virginia and Maryland, and the word went out. And still they found weapons. But it would have been a bloodbath if those people had been armed, more of them, and used those arms. So this decision, I just don't understand. If you want to have faith in the states, let the states make this decision. And what they did, they overturned this 105-year statute, and they said, no, you can't have this permit process. So that was that decision. The other decision, Dobbs, Tom, I've been thinking about you all weekend about this, that Tom was very, very involved with Justice Souter, and as was my mother, flew down and sat in the front row. I want to preface this abortion discussion with a story about my parents, because I just think about it so much right now. They were Jerry Ford delegates in 1976 and went out to Kansas City to the convention. And my mother was on the Republican platform committee arguing to keep the pro-choice platform in the Republican platform in 1976. And they lost, and then Reagan, and then, this march started. But the Casey decision was after David Souter made it onto the court. And he did believe in stare decisis, that it's already been decided. I've said to so many people this weekend, I went to 3 years of law school. You read 1 million cases, and what you learn is 2 words. It's already been decided, stare decisis. And I don't know what's going to happen to our courts and to our judiciary. And I'm not being hyperbolic. This is such a basic premise for us, and it's what keeps our country and our democracy stable. And yes, mistakes do get made, and I'm glad they overturned separate but equal. But this one, again, it's the vehemence, I think, that was really hard. And I have also been saying for several days, it's the dog that caught the car. They don't know the havoc that they will wreak in our society, at you as employers. And then last night I saw a Republican political operative quoted using that expression, the dog that caught the car. And what I mean by that, let me try to give you a little glimmer of this from my 25 years as an adoption attorney, as Tom mentioned. I mean, first of all, I'm starting to blush already. This is personal, and it's very private. And it's why the government should not decide. That's the top line and the bottom line. It's not the government's decision. But I represented women and girls from age 14 until well into their 40s. I worked with close to 300 birth mothers that were making this decision. And I would ask them, in the course of our understanding our relationship, did you consider terminating the pregnancy? Partly I was curious, and partly it was very relevant to their state of mind and how resolved they were to making this decision. Now, first of all, understand that I didn't meet most of these people until the 7th or 8th month of pregnancy. It was not unusual for me to have 2 weeks to turn this around. And I think part of what happens is there's denial turns out to be an incredibly strong emotion in our lives. And that you go through the first trimester and you think, oh, I don't think this is really happening. And then you go through the second trimester going, ooh, this is real, but I don't really have a plan. And then suddenly you're showing and your colleagues or your family are saying, oh, I didn't know you were married. Are you having a baby? You know, I didn't know you were having a baby. Are you married? And then you start dealing with it. And the way they would get to me was, you know, through healthcare workers or through clergy or through social workers. So it was a two-step thing. I wasn't advertising in the bus or anything. And so I knew that they needed a plan. And I wanted to provide the full range of options. I don't talk about this very often because it is so private and it is so personal. But I think every child should be wanted and raised in a family that wants them. And I also think that unexpected pregnancy happens, and it happens to good people. And we need to minimize the stigma and the shame, and we need to help people so that children end up in a better place. And so back to the question, virtually all had wanted to terminate the pregnancy. I think I can remember maybe on one hand the number of people that were very religious and would never choose abortion. But most, all of the women that I was dealing with hadn't dealt with it soon enough. The truth is here in New Hampshire, we don't have abortion after about 12 weeks. It would be an unusual case, 12 weeks being 3 months. And keep in mind, whenever you hear the weeks, the first 4 weeks don't count because you don't know anything. So until you miss a period, you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So when you have statutes getting down to 15 weeks or below, when you have statutes that get to 6 weeks, you just can't deal with it fast enough. Low-income women can't get the money together. Young women can't get a ride. They can't talk to their families about it. And so my point being, it's personal, it's private, and it's not for the government. And what's going to happen now, and I'll wrap this up, but there are already headlines in Texas that hospitals are turning away women having miscarriages. And miscarriages are not something we talk about and that we ever have. In my generation, older, younger, they're painful, they're personal, but they're very, very common. And these statutes, some of them go too far. Physicians are not going to be able to help their patients. These are typically people who want to have children. They want to have another child. They may have a child or two at home. They can afford another child. This is not who you're typically thinking of when you think of this story. So I just encourage everyone, keep an open mind, make damn sure that New Hampshire is a place where people can get the health care that they need lawfully, because I really, really worry. And let me just close with this. It impacts our role in the society. I wouldn't be standing before you today as a member of Congress if this had not been the law for 50 years. And I say that for someone, this is neither here nor there. Coincidentally, I have not had an abortion. But most of my friends, most of my colleagues in Congress, many, many women my age, over the course of fertility, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I was able to finish college, to go to Washington, to work on Capitol Hill, to go to law school, to come home, to start my career, to meet Brad. I was 30 when we got married. I was 32 when Zach was born, 35 when Travis was born. I was able to have my life. And my mom, who we've talked about a lot, got married when she was 18 years old. She finished her exam for her first year of college at Mount Holyoke. She was president of her class. She got married that afternoon and never went back to college. And she had 5 children. And she had a great life. But I just think women deserve more autonomy. And look around your companies. Look at the vice presidents and the presidents and the terrific talent. And I just don't think we should try to run this country on half the brain power. So that was maybe a little more than you asked for. Thank you for the question. Thank you all for your kindness. I really appreciate it. As you can tell, every time I think I've gotten over the emotion of a year and a half ago, it's probably closer to the surface, and this weekend it was very close to the surface.
You
So.
get out of here without a bag.
Oh, yay!
So this is the official,
Oh, Tom. Oh, my gosh, beach bag.
there you go.
This is the best thing about New Hampshire is I'm living my best life. The best thing about representing New Hampshire is coming home to Newfound Lake on the weekends. So thank you all. Good to be with you. And we're happy to visit your company, your college, your hospital. Nick and Amy can set that up. We're out and about and look forward to seeing you and all your folks in person. Stay safe.